What you're about to witness isn't just a courtroom outburst. It's a clash between ego and empathy, between arrogance and the kind of wisdom that only decades on the bench can teach. A 47-year-old man storms out of Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom mid-hearing, slamming the door on justice itself. To him, it was just anger. To Judge Caprio, it was a lesson waiting to be taught. Minutes later, his lawyer drags him back in, and what unfolds next becomes one of the most unforgettable displays of humility ever seen in a courtroom. Because this wasn't just a man on trial for a traffic ticket, it was a man on trial for his attitude. And when he comes face to face with Judge Caprio again, he learns, in front of everyone, that respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. This is the story of Danny Morrison, a man who walked out on one of the kindest judges in America, only to discover that walking back in was the moment that changed his life. What happens next will make you rethink the meaning of accountability, forgiveness, and redemption. Because Judge Caprio didn't humiliate him, he healed him. He showed that discipline without compassion breeds resentment, but compassion with accountability transforms lives. So before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments about a time someone's humility earned your respect. Because this story isn't just about a man losing his temper. It's about how one judge's calm turned that anger into understanding. You're about to see why Danny Morrison's courtroom meltdown became his greatest awakening, and how Judge Frank Caprio proved once again that true justice doesn't punish, it teaches. Stay until the end because what Judge Caprio says to Danny in their final exchange will give you chills and restore your faith in both justice and human nature. Where are you watching this video from? Let me know in the comments because this story touches people deeply from all around the world. Friday afternoon, 3:30 p.m., Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio is wrapping up a long week of cases. The docket shows one more. Danny Morrison, age 47, charged with reckless driving and failure to appear at his original court date. Judge Caprio, now 77 years old, has seen thousands of defendants over
his decades on the bench. He's developed an intuition about people who's genuinely remorseful, who's trying to manipulate the system, and who simply doesn't understand the gravity of their situation. The bailiff calls Danny's name. Through the courtroom doors walks a man in an expensive suit, designer shoes, gold watch catching the light. Danny Morrison owns 3 successful car dealerships in the Providence area. A self-made man who started selling used cars from a small lot 20 years ago and built an empire through aggressive tactics and an unshakable belief that money solves everything. His BMW is parked outside in a no parking zone. He figured he'd only be a few minutes. In the gallery, about a dozen people wait for their own cases. An elderly woman clutches her purse nervously. 2 young men in work clothes whisper about their parking tickets. The court's stenographer glances up, recognizing the type immediately. Officer Martinez, who wrote Danny's original ticket, sits in the back row, curious to see how this plays out. Danny approaches the bench with the casual swagger of someone who's used to getting his way through money and intimidation. No respectful posture, no Your Honor, just a man who clearly believes this is beneath him. "Yeah, I'm here about the driving thing," Danny says, not bothering to stand straight. "Look, Judge, I'm a busy man. I employ 47 people, pay more taxes than most folks make in a year. Can we just settle this with a fine so I can get back to running my businesses?" Judge Caprio looks up from the paperwork, his expression neutral, but his eyes noting every detail of Danny's demeanor. In nearly 5 decades on the bench, he's developed a particular distaste for arrogance masquerading as importance. "Mr. Morrison, you failed to appear for your original court date. Today, we're addressing both the reckless driving charge and your failure to respect this court's schedule. Do you understand the serious? Judge Caprio's voice remains calm, but those who know him recognize the warning signs. His posture straightens slightly. His words become more deliberate. Mr. Morrison, this court operates on respect. Respect for the law, respect for the process, and respect for everyone who appears before it. Your attitude suggests you believe your business dealings excuse you from the same responsibilities that apply to every other citizen. Danny laughs, actually laughs in the courtroom. Come on.
Judge, you know how the world works. People like me keep this economy running. We create jobs, pay taxes. A little flexibility goes a long way. The courtroom falls silent. Even the court reporter stops typing. Judge Caprio removes his glasses, a gesture that veteran court watchers know means something significant is about to happen. Mr. Morrison, Judge Caprio says, his voice carrying the weight of decades of judicial authority. You seem to believe that your financial success exempts you from showing basic respect in my courtroom. Danny's response shocks everyone present. He throws his hands up in exaggerated exasperation. Respect? Look, I've been paying people's salaries in this city for 15 years. Half the cops who wrote this ticket probably bought their cars from my lots. You want to lecture me about respect when I'm the one keeping this place afloat? The courtroom erupts in whispers. Court officers exchange glances. The elderly woman in the gallery gasps audibly. Officer Martinez shakes his head in disbelief. Judge Caprio's bailiff takes a step forward, sensing the situation escalating. Judge Caprio stands slowly, his 77-year-old frame carrying the dignity of his office. The entire courtroom falls silent. Even the whispers stop. His voice drops to a level that somehow commands more attention than any shout. Sir, your wealth does not grant you immunity from courtesy. Your tax contributions do not purchase you special treatment in my courtroom. And your employment of 47 people does not excuse your fundamental failure to understand that in here we are all equal under the law. Danny's face flushes red. Years of having employees defer to him, of having his money smooth over problems, have left him completely unprepared for someone who cannot be bought or intimidated. Equal under the law? Danny's voice rises. That's rich coming from a system that lets real criminals walk while harassing successful businessmen over a simple traffic violation. I don't have time for this philosophical lecture from someone who's never had to meet a payroll. The insult hangs in the air like a physical presence. Judge Caprio, who immigrated to America as a child, who worked his way through law school, who has dedicated his life to public service, absorbs the blow with visible restraint. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to give you one opportunity to reconsider your approach and show this court the respect it deserves. Danny checks his watch, again makes an exaggerated sighing sound and delivers the line that will haunt him. You know what? I'm done with this. I've got real problems. The courtroom watches in stunned silence as Danny strides toward the exit. Judge Caprio's voice follows him, calm, but carrying absolute authority. Mr. Morrison, if you leave this courtroom without being dismissed, you will be in contempt of court. Danny doesn't even turn around. He waves his hand dismissively over his shoulder. Add it to my tab, Your Honor. The emphasis on Your Honor is mocking, disrespectful. Danny pushes through the courtroom doors and disappears into the hallway, leaving behind a courtroom full of people who have just witnessed something unprecedented in Judge Caprio's decades on the bench. Judge Caprio stands for a long moment processing what has just occurred. In 45 years of judicial service, he has seen arrogance, disrespect, and entitlement, but never such blatant contempt combined with such fundamental misunderstanding of what justice means. Court will be in recess, Judge Caprio announces quietly. Mr. Morrison's case will be rescheduled and additional charges will be filed. 30 minutes later, Danny Morrison sits in his BMW outside the courthouse, making phone calls about a car auction, already having dismissed the entire court experience as a waste of time. His phone rings. Robert Chen, his attorney of 8 years, calling from his office across town. Danny, I just got a call from the courthouse. Please tell me you didn't actually walk out on Judge Frank Caprio? Danny barely looks up from his auction catalog. Bob, relax. It was just some old judge on a power trip. I've got bigger problems than a traffic ticket. The silence on the other end of the phone stretches uncomfortably long. When Robert speaks again, his voice carries an urgency Danny has never heard before. Danny, you need to listen to me very carefully. Judge Frank Caprio isn't just some old judge. He's one of the most respected jurists in New England. What you just did, Danny, you could be facing serious jail time. Jail time for a traffic ticket? Come on, Bob. You're being dramatic. Robert's voice becomes deadly serious. Danny, you're not listening. You walked out of a courtroom in the middle of proceedings. That's criminal contempt of court. But that's not even the worst part. Judge Caprio has discretion over your sentencing, and you just showed him the utmost disrespect. Danny finally stops reading his auction catalog. What are you saying? I'm saying that instead of a fine and traffic school, you could be looking at 6 months in jail, loss of your driver's license, and criminal charges that could affect your business licenses. Danny, you might have just destroyed everything you've spent 15 years building. The words hit Danny like cold water. That can't be right. It was just a traffic case. It stopped being just a traffic case the moment you walked out. And Danny, there's something else you need to know about Judge Caprio. Robert continues, his voice heavy with the weight of what he's about to reveal. Judge Frank Caprio is known for his compassion. He's famous for helping people, for understanding their circumstances, for giving second chances. Danny, he probably would have reduced your fine and sent you to traffic school. Instead, you insulted a man who has dedicated his entire life to serving his community. Danny's stomach begins to twist. What do you mean? Robert's response is immediate and non-negotiable. We're going back to that courthouse today. You're going to apologize, genuinely apologize, and hope that Judge Caprio's legendary compassion extends to people who have insulted everything he stands for. Today, it's Friday afternoon. Danny, Judge Caprio stayed late to handle your case. The least you can do is get back there before he goes home for the weekend. Every hour that passes makes this worse. An hour later, Robert Chan is pacing outside the courthouse, waiting for Danny to arrive. When Danny's BMW pulls up, this time in a legal parking space, Robert notices his client looks smaller somehow, less confident. Are you ready for this? Robert asks. Danny nods, but his usual swagger is completely gone. Babu, what if he won't listen? Then you'll face the consequences of your actions. But Danny, Judge Caprio is known for giving people chances to make things right. The question is whether you're genuinely ready to make things right. At 4:45 p.m., Judge Frank Caprio is in his chambers, reviewing Danny Morrison's case file and preparing the contempt charges. His secretary knocks on the door. Judge, Robert Chen is here with his client, Mr. Morrison. They're requesting to address the court. Judge Caprio looks up, genuinely surprised. In his experience, people who storm out of his courtroom don't typically
return the same day, seeking reconciliation. Tell Mr. Chen, I'll see them in 5 minutes. When court reconvenes, the atmosphere is completely different. Danny Morrison enters behind his attorney, and his transformation is immediately visible. Gone is the expensive suit, replaced by simple slacks and a shirt. His posture is different, respectful, uncertain, humbled. Judge Caprio takes his seat, his expression unreadable. The courtroom is nearly empty except for a few court officers and staff who stayed late, curious to see how this unprecedented situation would resolve. Mr. Morrison, Judge Caprio begins, his voice measured. This is highly unusual. You left my courtroom without permission, showing contempt for this court and the judicial process. Why have you returned? Danny stands, and for the first time in the proceedings, his voice shakes slightly. Your Honor, I came back because I realized I made a terrible mistake. Not just walking out, though that was inexcusable, but in how I conducted myself in your courtroom. Judge Caprio listens without interruption.
His decades of experience reading people now focused entirely on determining whether this apology is genuine or calculated. Your Honor, my attorney explained to me who you are, what you've accomplished, how you've served this community. I came into your courtroom thinking I was more important than the process, more important than showing respect. I was wrong. Danny pauses, visibly struggling with words that don't come naturally to someone accustomed to always being right. I insulted you personally, and I insulted everything this courtroom represents. I have no excuse for my behavior. I can only tell you that I'm ashamed of how I acted, and I'm here to accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. Judge Caprio studies Danny for a long moment. In 4 decades on the bench, he's developed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between genuine remorse and manipulation. Mr. Morrison, when you left here 2 hours ago, you demonstrated contempt, not just for me personally, but for the rule of law itself. You suggested that your wealth and business success entitled you to different treatment under the law. Danny nods, his face flushed with embarrassment. Yes, Your Honor, and I was completely wrong. You mocked the concept of equality under the law. You dismissed the importance of respect in a courtroom. You insulted my life's work and everything I believe in. Each word hits Danny like a physical blow. He's beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistakes. Yes, Your Honor, I understand that now. Judge Caprio leans forward slightly. Mr. Morrison, tell me what changed in the last... Takes a deep breath. What brought you back here? His voice carries genuine emotion for the first time. Your Honor, my attorney told me about your background, how you came to this country as an immigrant, worked construction to pay for law school, how you've dedicated your life to serving others. And I realized that I've spent so much time building my business that I forgot basic human decency. He pauses, gathering courage for what comes next. When I walked out of here, I thought I was important because I have money, because I employ people. But you've spent 40 years serving your community, treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their bank account. I've been successful in business, but I failed as a human being today. Judge Caprio's expression softens almost imperceptibly. This is the breakthrough he's been listening for, the moment when ego gives way to genuine understanding. Your Honor, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to prove that I can be better than the man who walked out of here 2 hours ago. Judge Frank Caprio removes his glasses and cleans them slowly, a ritual those who know him recognize as his way of processing something significant. The courtroom is completely silent, everyone understanding they're witnessing something rare and important. Mr. Morrison, he begins, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of judicial wisdom. You've given me something to think about this afternoon. Danny remains standing, uncertain whether to hope or prepare for the worst. When you left here 2 hours ago, I was prepared to throw the book at you. Criminal contempt, maximum fines, jail time. Your disrespect was unlike anything I've experienced in my career. Danny swallows hard, accepting that his fate is entirely in this man's hands. But you came back, Mr. Morrison. That tells me something important. It tells me that somewhere underneath that arrogance and entitlement, there's a man capable of recognizing his mistakes. Judge Caprio stands, and his presence seems to fill the entire courtroom. Let me tell you something about respect, Mr. Morrison. I've been on this bench for over 40 years. I've seen wealthy defendants and poor defendants. I've seen people with PhDs and people who can't read. And you know what I've learned? A person's character has nothing to do with their bank account and everything to do with how they treat others. Danny nods, hanging on every word. You told me you employ 47 people. That's impressive. But those 47 people work for you because you pay them, not because you respect them.
True leadership isn't about being the boss, it's about serving others. Judge Caprio walks around from behind his bench, something he rarely does, bringing himself closer to eye level with Danny. When I came to this country as a young man, I learned that America's greatness isn't in its wealth. It's in the promise that everyone, regardless of their background, gets equal treatment under the law. You challenged that principle today. Yes, Your Honor, and I was wrong. You were wrong, Mr. Morrison, but you were also teachable. You came back, you listened, you learned, and that gives me hope. Danny feels tears forming in his eyes, something that hasn't happened in years. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to do something I've never done before in a case like this. I'm going to give you a choice. Choice 2. You spend the next 6 months learning what service really means. Every Saturday for 6 months, you'll volunteer at the Providence Community Kitchen, serving meals to people who can't afford them. You'll work alongside people who have nothing, but give everything they have to help others. Danny's eyes widen. This wasn't what he expected. But that's not all, Mr. Morrison. You'll also spend 4 hours every month in community court, watching how real justice works. You'll see me sentence people who show respect despite having nothing, and you'll understand the difference between true dignity and purchased privilege. Judge Caprio returns to his bench, but his voice remains personal, direct. If you choose the community service, you'll report to me personally every month. You'll write a report about what you've learned, and at the end of 6 months, if you've genuinely learned what respect and service mean, I'll reduce your charges to a simple traffic violation. Danny can barely speak. Your Honor, why would you give me this chance? Judge Caprio's response will become the moment that defines both men's lives. Because, Mr. Morrison, I believe in redemption. I believe that people can change, can grow,
can become better than their worst moments. You showed me your worst today. Now I want to see your best. Danny breaks down completely, tears flowing freely for the first time since childhood. Your Honor, I choose the community service. I want to learn. I want to be better. 6 months later, Danny Morrison returns to Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom for his final report. But this time, he's not alone. Behind him sit 12 people, volunteers from the Providence Community Kitchen, community court staff, and people whose lives he's touched during his service. Danny approaches the bench, but his posture now reflects genuine respect rather than forced compliance. In his hands, he carries a folder thick with reports, letters, and photographs. Your Honor, I'm here to report on my 6 months of community service. Judge Caprio, now 78, settles back in his chair with genuine curiosity. Over 4 decades, he's seen many court-ordered services, but rarely has he seen such a transformation in someone's demeanor. Tell me what you've learned, Mr. Morrison. Danny opens his folder but doesn't read from it. Instead, he speaks from the heart. Your Honor, 6 months ago, I thought success meant having money and power. I measured my worth by my bank account and my ability to intimidate others. I was wrong about everything. He gestures toward the people who've come to support him. These people taught me what real success looks like. Maria, who's sitting in the 3rd row, has been volunteering at the community kitchen for 8 years. She works 2 jobs and still gives her Saturdays to feed people who have nothing. She taught me that generosity isn't about what you can afford to give. It's about giving regardless of what you can afford. Judge Caprio notices the genuine emotion in Danny's voice, the way he looks at the volunteers with real respect. Your Honor, I'll never forget my first day at the community kitchen. I showed up in a $300 shirt, thinking I was doing charity work. But when I tried to serve soup and spilled it everywhere, a homeless veteran named Frank, yes, Frank, like you, Your Honor, patiently showed me how to do it properly. He said, "Son, service isn't about looking good. It's about making others feel dignified." Danny's voice catches as he continues. That man had lost everything. His home, his family, his job. But he
still had more grace and dignity than I'd shown in years. I've served over 1,200 meals in the last 6 months. But more importantly, I've eaten alongside people who have nothing but still share what little they have. I learned that dignity remembering some of those cases. But the most important thing I learned, Your Honor, is that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn through service. 6 months ago, I thought people should respect me because of my money. Now I understand that the only respect worth having comes from lifting others up. Danny pulls out a letter from his folder. Your Honor, this is from the director of the Providence Community Kitchen. She's offered me a position on their board of directors, not because of my money, though I'm honored to be their largest donor now, but because of the work I've done alongside their volunteers. Judge Caprio's eyebrows raised slightly. This is beyond what he expected. There's something else, Your Honor. I've restructured my businesses. Every employee now receives profit sharing, full health benefits, and paid time off to volunteer. I've learned that true success means lifting others up, not standing on top of them. Danny pauses, gathering courage for his final statement. Your Honor, 6 months ago, I was successful but empty. I had money but no purpose. You could have destroyed my life with a single sentence. Instead, you saved it by teaching me what service really means. Judge Frank Caprio stands, his voice filled with genuine pride. Judge Caprio leans forward, his voice steady, filled with the calm authority that only comes from decades of wisdom. Mr. Morrison, in 45 years on this bench, I've watched thousands stand where you stand now. Some walk away unchanged. Some leave angry. But a few, a rare few, walk out transformed. And today, you've become one of them. The courtroom sits silent for a heartbeat. And then, as if on cue, the quiet breaks into applause. Not for the verdict, for the man. The volunteers who once came to support Danny now stand, clapping through tears, because they've just witnessed something greater than justice. They've witnessed redemption. Judge Caprio nods gently, emotion visible in his eyes. Your charges, he says softly, are hereby reduced to a simple traffic violation. Fine suspended. Then, after a pause that feels eternal,
Adds, but what you've gained today is worth far more than any penalty this court could impose. You've learned what true leadership looks like, service. You've learned that dignity isn't a title, it's a choice, and that respect isn't inherited, it's earned through compassion. He stands and extends his hand. Welcome, Mr. Morrison, he says, voice trembling slightly, to the brotherhood of those who understand that success is not measured by what we possess, but by what we give. Danny rises. Their hands meet, not as judge and defendant, but as equals. Two men bound by understanding that justice, at its purest form, is the courage to forgive. The applause swells once more as Judge Caprio turns to the courtroom. If every judgment could end like this, he says quietly, we'd have fewer sentences and more second chances. As Donnie walks out, the camera lingers on Judge Caprio, the man whose gavel never struck in anger, but whose compassion struck deeper than any law could reach. Because long after the cases fade, and the cameras stop rolling, his legacy endures. In every person he lifted instead of punished, in every soul he reminded that justice can still have a heart. Judge Frank Caprio, a man who didn't just interpret the law, he humanized it. And through stories like Danny Morrison's, his courtroom will never close.